Welcome to the explainer. We've all been there, right? Part of some big, exciting project that just fizzles out and fails. Well, today we're going to dig into a really powerful framework that explains why that happens so often. And trust me, it goes way deeper than the usual excuses we hear. Let's just start with a number, 70%. I mean, that's wild. According to some studies, that's the failure rate for major change efforts in organizations. Just let that sink in for a second. 7 out of every 10 big, ambitious projects are basically set up to fail before they even get going. So why? Why do so many of these big projects fail? It's like this chronic problem, right? A kind of organizational illness that we just can't seem to shake. We keep throwing solutions at it, treating the symptoms. But what if we've been getting the diagnosis wrong this whole time? So let's talk about this chronic condition of failure. We're always told the causes are pretty straightforward, right? Things like poor communication or a bad strategy. But what if those aren't the real causes at all? What if they're just the symptoms you can see on the surface, while the real problem is something much, much deeper? Okay, so let's look at these common explanations. Yeah, we hear them all the time. Oh, communication was terrible, or there was no sense of urgency, or the strategy was just flawed. And sure, they sound right, they make sense, but here's the thing. They're just describing the symptoms. They tell us what went wrong on the surface, but they don't get to the fundamental reason why it all fell apart in the first place. So to get to that why, we're going to need a totally new kind of diagnostic tool. And I'm not talking about another management fad or a new technique. We need a whole new way of seeing, a framework that can basically give us an X-ray of any system, whether it's a project, a company, or even a whole ideology, to see what's really going on underneath it all. Okay, so what is this tool? It's called the 5D Metatheory. And I know that sounds a little intimidating, right? Metatheory. But stick with me. All it really means is that it's a theory about other theories. Think of it like this. It's not just another map. It's the key that lets you understand how to read all the maps. So a metatheory basically helps us take a giant step back and look at the deep foundational assumptions behind our ideas. It's kind of like getting your hands on the architect's original blueprints. You're not just looking at the finished building, you're seeing the core structure and understanding why it was built that way.
All right, so let's get into the 5 foundational dimensions. This 5D metatheory gives us 5 different lenses or 5 different ways to look at something. Each one asks a really fundamental question, and each one reveals a completely different layer of whatever it is we're trying to understand.
So let's go ahead and calibrate each of these 5 analytical lenses. We're going to try on each one by one and see what it shows us. Okay, first up, we've got ontology. This is the being lens, and this one's deep. It asks, what does the system assume is actually real? What does it believe truly exists? So, for example, does a company see its people as just cogs in a machine? Or does it see them as a living, breathing, creative system? That one core belief, that one assumption about what is, changes absolutely everything. Next, we have epistemology. This is the knowing lens. And the question here is, how does this system know what it knows? How does it justify its beliefs? Does it only trust cold, hard data, spreadsheets and analytics? Or does it also make room for things like intuition, hands-on experience, and just human connection? Whatever it chooses to value as knowledge is going to create its biggest blind spot. Number 3 is axiology, the valuing lens. Now, this one is huge. It's about what the system truly values deep down, not just the mission statement they hang on the wall, right? What behavior actually gets rewarded here? Is it innovation, or is it just quietly conforming? Is it ruthless efficiency, or is it genuine care? You really got to pay attention to this one, because that gap, that space between what's said and what's done, is where everything falls apart. Fourth on our list is telos, which is the purpose lens. And we're not talking about quarterly goals or short-term objectives here. This is the big why. What is the ultimate purpose, the true north? What's the deep underlying direction that's supposed to pull everything together? Because without that clear telos, everything just becomes fragmented, and all that energy just fizzles out. And last but not least, we have praxis, the acting lens. So after all that deep stuff about being and knowing and valuing, this is where the rubber meets the road. What does the system actually do? What are its day-to-day practices, its habits, its real-world behaviors? Praxis is how all those other 4 dimensions show up in reality, where you can actually see them in action. All right, so now we have our 5 lenses. We're equipped with our new diagnostic tool. Let's circle back to where we started, that massive 70% failure rate, and see what happens when we apply a 5D diagnosis. In this quote, man, this just hits the nail on the head. Most change efforts focus only on the praxis, on the doing. We adopt new techniques, new software, new processes, but we never touch the ontology, the fundamental being of the organization. We don't change who we are or why we're doing it, the telos. So of course, the new actions feel fake and mechanical. They don't stick because the deep down foundation hasn't moved at all. And just look at this table. This lays out the whole diagnosis perfectly. The failure isn't because of one little thing. It's a total systemic breakdown. It's a complete misalignment across all 5 dimensions. You've got new actions, the praxis, that feel totally hollow. You've got an epistemology that only trusts one kind of data, creating huge blind spots. The stated values, the axiology, are in direct conflict with what actually gets rewarded. The core being, the ontology, is never even talked about. And there's no clear shared purpose or telos driving the whole thing. I mean, when you see it like this, it was basically guaranteed to fail. So as you can see, this is a pretty powerful new lens for clarity. But here's the cool part. This tool isn't just for doing autopsies on projects that have already died. You can use it as a lens to understand any complex system with so much more clarity, from, I don't know, your local book club, all the way up to massive political ideologies. Yeah, the 5D framework can scale from analyzing a simple project to analyzing entire ideologies. And to show you just how powerful this is, let's scale it way up. The source material for this explainer actually uses this exact framework to look at the deep structural differences between huge systems like communism and capitalism, and it reveals some pretty incredible insights into why one was so much more adaptive than the other. So let's just take one dimension, okay? Epistemology, how the system knows things. Well, communism had this really rigid, centralized, top-down way of knowing. It basically suppressed any local feedback or learning from the ground up. It couldn't adapt. Capitalism, on the other hand, has a much more pluralistic way of knowing. It allows for all sorts of experimentation and lets information bubble up from all over the place. That's what allows it to learn and evolve. But there's a really important catch to using this tool effectively. You can't just dive in. The analyst, that's you, needs to be able to temporarily bracket their own commitments. Basically, you have to stop yourself from bringing your own assumptions into the analysis, or else you'll just end up seeing what you want to see. So how do you do that? Well, there's a method called bracketing. It's a pretty simple 4-step process. First, you have to identify your own commitments and assumptions. What are your beliefs on these 5 dimensions? Second, you have to temporarily suspend them or bracket them. Just put them on a shelf for a little while. Third, you analyze the system's 5 dimensions completely on its own terms. Try to see the world from its point of view. And then finally, once you've done that, you can reintroduce your own commitments for comparison and to make a judgment. It's about understanding before you evaluate. So now you have the tool, what system would you diagnose first? I mean, that's the real takeaway here. You've now got this incredibly powerful framework for seeing the world on a much, much deeper level. It lets you look right past all the surface-level noise and drama and diagnose the hidden structural problems in pretty much any system you can think of, at your job, in politics, maybe even in your own life. So the big question I'll leave you with is, what hidden misalignments will you uncover first?